What would you sacrifice to save a memory? Not just any memory. The one memory keeping you going. The last one you have left. A taste, a smell, a feeling. How much of your pride would you give up just to keep it from fading away completely? Side A, the maker. My name is Julian. I'm not Leo. My father was Leo. This place, Leo's Legendary Pies, is the only thing he left me. He used to say pizza wasn't a food. It was a feeling. A perfect circle of memories. And for 20 years, this place was my whole world. The worn linoleum floors, the smell of garlic and oregano baked into the walls, the scorch marks on the ceiling from that one time my dad tried to flambe a dessert pizza. It was home. Then Mr. Henderson started coming in. He wasn't a customer. He was a toll. A tax on our time, our ingredients, our patience. He ran a local food blog, the Henderson Herald, which had just enough of a following to make local business owners nervous. He was a big fish in a very small, very fragile pond, and he knew it. It started small. He'd order a classic pepperoni, take one bite, and declare it disappointing. Then he'd write a 2-star review online, complaining about the uninspired cheese-to-sauce ratio. The next day, he'd be back, smiling that thin, reptilian smile of his. He'd suggest that a free meal might, just might, help him reevaluate his opinion. And we'd give it to him. What choice did we have? A few bad reviews online, and suddenly the Friday night rush gets a little quieter. Then his demands escalated. He'd show up during peak hours, holding up the line to request off-menu items, a calzone shaped like the state capitol, a pizza with the toppings arranged into a mosaic of his face. My staff would look at me, their eyes wide, and I'd just nod. Make it happen. We scraped by month to month on razor-thin margins. We couldn't afford his wrath. He always paid for his absurdities in the same way. He'd pull out his phone, snap a picture, and post it with a caption like, "Leo's is really stepping up their game." A testament to my constructive feedback. He never tagged the shop. He just tagged himself. His influence was the payment. One Tuesday, it got worse. Tuesday was our slowest day. I was experimenting with a new sourdough starter, the way Dad used to. Henderson strolled in, not even glancing at the menu. He told me he was hosting a very important dinner party. He needed something special. He wanted a white pizza, no tomato sauce sauce, but with anchovies, and pineapple, and spicy chorizo, and, his words, a drizzle of something unexpected. It was a culinary war crime. The salt from the anchovies, the acid from the pineapple, the grease from the chorizo, it was designed to fail. I told him the flavor profile was challenging. He just chuckled. He said if I was a true artist, I'd make it work. I spent an hour on that monstrosity. I ended up making a balsamic glaze with a hint of chili. It was the only thing I could think of to tie the mess together. I boxed it up myself. He didn't even look inside. He just took it, said he'd consider giving us a good write-up, and left. He didn't pay a dime. The next morning, I saw the review, 1 star, an amateurish attempt at fusion. The flavors clashed violently, a sign of a chef who has lost his way. It seems Leo's legendary status died with Leo himself. The phone nearly slipped from my shaking hands. He'd taken my creation, my time, my ingredients, and used them to publicly execute my father's legacy. That night, I sat in the empty pizzeria long after closing. The chairs were stacked on the tables, casting long shadows across the floor. It was a ghost of what it used to be. I found myself talking to my dad to the empty space where he used to stand, dusting his hands with flour. I told him I was tired. I told him I didn't know how to fight this. And in the silence of that empty room, I felt a familiar despair creeping in. The business was failing, and it was all my fault. Side B, the critic. My name is Arthur Henderson. Before I was a food critic, I was an accountant. For 35 years, I lived in a world of spreadsheets and ledgers. A world of black and white. My wife, Eleanor, she was the color. She loved food. Not just eating it, but the story behind it. The little hole-in-the-wall diner with the grumpy cook who made the best pancakes. The taco truck that was only on a specific corner on Thursdays. Food, for her, was an adventure. Her favorite place was a little pizza parlor called Leo's. It wasn't fancy or trendy. But Leo, the owner, he was an artist. He knew Eleanor's order before she even spoke. A simple margarita. But he'd always add a little something extra. A different kind of basil from his garden, a sprinkle of a special sea salt. He'd bring it to our table and say, "Just a little experiment for my best customer," and Eleanor would light up. Her smile, it could have powered the whole city. We went there every Friday for 15 years. It was our place. When Leo passed away, his son took over, Julian. A good kid, but he lacked his father's spark. The pizzas were fine. They were technically correct. All the right ingredients in all the right places. But the magic was gone. The little experiment was gone. It tasted like an obligation. Then Eleanor got sick. It was fast. Ugly. The kind of sickness that steals a person piece by piece, starting with their memories. One of the last things to go was her appetite. She couldn't eat much. But some days she'd wake up and whisper, I could go for a Leo's pizza. It was a good day when she said that. It meant a piece of her was still there. I'd go to Leo's and order her margarita, but it wasn't the same. It was just a pizza. I'd bring it home and she'd take one bite, and this look of confusion would cross her face. She'd say, this isn't right, and she wouldn't eat anymore. Every time it happened, I felt like I had failed her. I was losing her, and I couldn't even give her this one small piece of comfort, this one perfect memory. So I started pushing the kid, Julian. I don't know what I thought. Maybe that if I challenged him, if I forced him to be creative, to think outside the box, some of his father's artistry would rub off on him. Maybe I could provoke the legendary back into Leo's legendary pies, so I started the blog. The Henderson Herald. It was a ridiculous name, I know, but it gave me a reason, a shield. I'd go in and make these impossible demands, the mosaic of my face, the state capital calzone. I wasn't trying to be cruel. I was trying to wake him up, to see if there was an artist hiding under the apron. I wanted him to tell me no. I wanted him to say, that's a stupid idea, Mr. Henderson. Here's a better one. That's what his father would have done. But he never did. He just complied, with a tired, resentful look in his eyes. He'd make my monstrosities, and they would be technically perfect and utterly soulless, and my heart would sink a little further each time. That Tuesday, I was desperate. Eleanor had had a bad morning. She hadn't recognized me for a full hour. When she finally came back, she was weak, and she whispered it. A Leo's pizza. I went to the shop with a foolish, desperate plan. I ordered the most disgusting combination I could think of. Anchovies, pineapple, chorizo. I thought, surely this will be the time. He'll have to refuse. He'll have to get angry. He'll have to show some passion. He'll have to be an artist. He just nodded. He disappeared into the kitchen and came back with a pizza box. It felt light, empty. I took it home, my hand shaking. I opened the box in front of Eleanor. The pizza was fine. It smelled confusing, but it was perfectly made. She took one small bite, chewed slowly. And then she looked at me, her eyes clearer than they had been in weeks, and said, it's not the same. She pushed the plate away. I failed again. So I wrote the review. I wasn't reviewing the pizza. I was reviewing my own failure. And I was cruel. Because the truth was too painful to write. The collision. 2 days later, on a Thursday night, I went back. I don't know why. Maybe I'm a masochist. Maybe I just wanted to stand in the place that held so many of my best memories, even if it was a ghost now. The shop was empty except for Julian, who was wiping down the counter. He saw me, and for the first time, I saw something other than exhaustion in his eyes. It was fire. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but he spoke first. He said, I have an order for you. He didn't wait for my response. He turned and went into the kitchen. I stood there, confused by the empty counter. The smell of the ovens, the faint dusting of flour in the air. For a second, it felt like old times. Like any minute, Leo would come out, wiping his hands on his apron. Then Julian returned. He was carrying a pizza box, but he was holding it strangely, carefully, like it was heavy. He placed it on the counter between us. It wasn't a normal pizza box. It was 2 large boxes, one taped on top of the other, with the sides bulging. He slid it towards me. It's on the house, he said. His voice was flat, devoid of any emotion. What is it? I asked. He looked me dead in the eye. Your masterpiece, he said. I realized you're not just a critic, you're a collaborator. So I made your ultimate pizza, every single topping we have. Every meat, every vegetable, every cheese, every sauce, all on one pie. This isn't my creation, Mr. Henderson. It's yours. I stared at the box. It was a monument to malice, a monstrosity. I lifted the lid. The sight was obscene. It was a mountain of food. Pepperoni slices were swimming next to pineapple chunks. Olives were buried under a landslide of feta and cheddar. Anchovies were draped over mushrooms. There were dollops of pesto and Alfredo and barbecue sauce fighting for space with the traditional marinara. It was overflowing. It was inedible. It was my own bad taste, served back to me on a slab of dough. And in that moment, something in me broke. All the grief, the frustration, the helplessness of the past year, it all came pouring out. I didn't yell. My voice was quiet. Her favorite was the margarita, I said. Julian just stared at me. His was too, he replied, his voice just as quiet. My wife, I said, the words catching in my throat. Eleanor, she's sick. She can't remember much, but she remembers this place. She remembers your father's pizza, and every time I bring one home, it's not right, and she knows. It breaks her heart. It breaks my heart. I looked down at the grotesque pizza on the counter. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I was trying to find him. In you. I saw the anger in Julian's face collapse. It wasn't a sudden change, but a slow, crumbling erosion. The fire in his eyes didn't go out, it just softened. He looked from my face to the pizza, then back to my face. He didn't say he was sorry. He didn't say he understood. He just leaned against the counter and deflated, all the fight gone out of him. I'm not him, Julian said, his voice barely a whisper. I know, I try. I use his recipes, his ingredients, his oven. But I'm not him, and every person who walks in here looks at me and sees his ghost, and I'm just not him. He pointed to a framed photo on the wall behind the counter, one I'd never noticed before. It was a picture of a much younger Julian, maybe 10 years old, standing on a stool, proudly holding a slightly lopsided pizza. His father, Leo, stood behind him, one hand on his son's shoulder, beaming with pride. He used to let me experiment, Julian said. He'd say the secret ingredient was making something you love, or someone you love. I think I forgot that. The silence after. We stood there for a long time in the quiet of the empty pizzeria. The only sound was the hum of the drink cooler. Two men on opposite sides of a counter, separated by a mountain of misunderstood intentions. There were no apologies. There was no grand resolution. The chasm between us was too wide for a simple handshake to cross. Finally, I closed the lid on the monstrous pizza. I pushed it back across the counter towards him. I can't take this, I said. He nodded. He didn't try to argue. He just took the box and dropped it into the large trash can behind the counter with a heavy thud. The sound echoed in the silent room. A final, definitive end. I turned to leave. My hand was on the door when Julian's voice stopped me. Wait. I turned back. He was holding a small plain pizza box. Margarita, he said. No charge. He held it out. It wasn't a peace offering. It wasn't forgiveness. It was just a pizza. I took it. Our fingers brushed for a second. Thank you, I said. He just nodded again. I walked out into the cool night air. I didn't look back. The bell on the door chimed softly behind me, a sound that suddenly felt like a goodbye. I don't know if Julian ever found his father's spark. I never went back to Leo's, and I took down the blog the next day. Sometimes, when I drive past, I see the lights on, and I see families inside sharing a pizza. I hope it's good. I hope it tastes like a memory. Eleanor passed away 2 months later. The night I brought home that last margarita, she was having a good day. She sat up in bed, and I opened the box. She looked at it for a long time. Then she took a small bite. A real one. She chewed, and then she looked at me. And she smiled. A small, faint echo of the real thing. She said, almost. Narrator voice, confessional. Pizza Parlor's everything order.